Brian, today we're talking about the overachievers of the 2024 NFL season. And if you watching this video right now want to overachieve and you want to be our teacher's pets, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We'd certainly appreciate it. We're racing to 250. There's been some models that suggest when we're going to hit it, and we laugh at that timeline. We know we can hit it much faster than they say we are. So help us reach our goal if you don't mind. Hit that button if you haven't already. But Brian, who are we talking about from Washington?
So we're going to talk about the Commanders today. But yeah, the Commanders, what a football team. Wow. Who knew? I certainly didn't. 12-5 in 2024. I mean, you can't beat that. You can beat it, but for a rookie quarterback, outstanding play. Let's get into some of their numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I was very high on Jayden Daniels coming out of LSU. I loved the draft pick. I thought he was going to be good, especially for fantasy football. I didn't realize how great of a real-life quarterback he was going to be. His preparation, his mentality, his leadership, he really took over this team. And whereas I thought their defense was going to be the driving force for them and they were going to rely on that defense to put them in position to win games last year, the opposite ended up being true. They were the seventh-ranked offense, 370 yards per game. You would have never guessed that offense was piloted by a rookie quarterback, but their defense was no slouch either. They ranked 13th, only giving up 327 yards per game. And in a division where you talk about how the Cowboys and how high-powered their offense can be at times when everybody is healthy, and certainly what the Eagles have done over the last couple of years, and certainly the season they had last year with Saquon and obviously the other superstars that they have on roster, these numbers were incredibly impressive for Washington. And I think this is a team that could be even better this year. So I guess we'll go ahead and get into that. Obviously, they did have a few departures. Dyami Brown, a wide receiver, as well as Olamide Zaccheaus. Zaccheaus is now a Chicago Bear, but Dyami Brown heads down to Jacksonville to play with Trevor Lawrence. I don't think that either of these guys are going to be hugely missing this offense because of some of the other moves that they've made. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Jonathan Allen heads off to Minnesota, and Jeremy Chin. We talked about him back in our Las Vegas Raiders video and what a big loss that could be. But Washington has also made a lot of really good investments this offseason. And I had to promise my brother I would keep this short because, it's real easy. If you watch some of our other videos, you know that we've talked about a lot of chief departures from other teams and how it seemed like I was consistently bringing up the Commanders as a team that it was going, maybe this is just the place to be. This is the hot team that everybody wanted to go to. I'm not sure if everybody's just taking their talents to the Capitol maybe, but they had a lot of acquisitions, but I'm only going to talk about a few. Deebo Samuel, they traded with the San Francisco 49ers. They only had to give up a fifth-round pick, 147 overall, to get him. What he's going to mean for this offense far outweighs the contributions of any average fifth-round pick. So I love what they did in bringing Deebo Samuel. Laramie Tunsil might be the biggest, though. Offensive tackle coming over from Houston. We talked about this in the Texans video. He was really their only good offensive lineman last year anyway. It was very puzzling that they sent him off. But their loss is Washington's game. This is going to be a very dominant blindside protector for Jayden Daniels. Yes, he is nearing the end of his career, but you cannot tell by the way that he played football last year. He doesn't seem like he's slowing down at all, and this is something that I think will only improve Jayden Daniels' game that much more to have that stalwart left tackle that he needs for that protection. And then Von Miller, kind of another aging name. He gets $6.1 million on a one-year deal, can get it $10.5 million with incentives. You love that. This defense is going to be hungry. They know what they're going to be doing, hunting down the quarterbacks in this division. So I like that. And then I think my favorite signing that they could have had on the defensive side of the ball was Javon Kinlaw coming over on the defensive line. He gets $45 million over 3 years. $30 million of that's guaranteed. He is probably my crown jewel from anybody not named Laramie Tunsil from the free agent market. Love what they added there. And they also brought back a couple of veterans in some key places too. Marcus Mariota, though I think it was only one game that Jayden Daniels missed. Marcus Mariota comes in as a result of that. And maybe it wasn't even a full game, but he looked, just as impressive as he has at any other point in his career. Maybe it's the Cliff Kingsbury scheme. Maybe he was just very comfortable with the weapons. I'm not sure what it was, but he looked very capable as a backup. So a 1-year, $8 million deal to keep that continuity, to keep that veteran presence behind Jayden Daniels. I love that move for them. And then Zach Ertz. Obviously, if you were a Ben Sinnott fantasy owner, you were punching air at this re-signing, but he gets $6.25 million to come back on a one-year deal. I expected him to retire after last year, but this is a team that made it to the NFC Championship game and got beat by a division rival. So maybe they're saying, hey, we're going to get the band back together. We're going to run it back. And maybe this is that last year for Zach Ertz. But he is going to be hyper targeted. Obviously, Jayden Daniels loves him. Cliff Kingsbury really loves him. If you go back to what they did together back at their Arizona days, he is somebody that has been a huge focal point of the Kingsbury offense for a number of seasons now. So before we get into the draft, Brian, what do you think about Washington and the moves they made as far as free agency goes?
Yeah, it should be fun football to watch without a doubt. I don't mind the Ertz, coming back for one more year. They did lose to what would be the Super Bowl champs. So, is it a tough loss? Every loss is tough at that level, but I don't blame him for coming back for 1 year. Especially if he does give Daniels that comfort level, that security blanket coming out the tight end spot. I don't mind it at all. I know you're mad about it because of the dynasty, but that's okay. You still got plenty more years to run that other tight end. So, but yeah, overall, I think they did a phenomenal job in the offseason. I didn't think they really needed to do much, but they brought in just some outstanding players, and I think overall they're going to be better. They could be in the Super Bowl this year without a doubt. I really want my Falcons there. Any true Falcons fan will tell you the same thing. We want them back in the Super Bowl. I said it in the Falcons video. If you haven't watched that, go back and watch that. Made a very early prediction. But I do really see the Commanders going to the Super Bowl this year, beating out the Eagles, beating out my Falcons, and being the top of the NFC.
Yeah, it could definitely happen. I mean, this is one of those teams that, like you said, they didn't have a lot of glaring needs, but they just worked on improving talent at key positions. And that's what you're looking for is like, hey, we were a good team last year, but we weren't a good enough team. So how can we compete and be that upper echelon team that nobody expected us to be this quickly? And it started in the first round, pick 29, Josh Carnley Jr., an offensive tackle out of Oregon. That's somebody that I think a lot of people could see being a top 15 pick when you start looking at draft rankings. He falls to them to the end of the first round. I don't know if he's ever going to be a starting left tackle in this league, if he's going to be the heir apparent to that Laramie Tunsil. That's why they brought him in. But maybe he's the day one starting right tackle. And if that's the case, you've got improved bookends for Jayden Daniels this year. And we've talked about it even in this division with what was going on in Dallas. And it's one of those things that improved protection makes everything else better. It makes your running backs more effective. It gives your quarterback more time to make better decisions and better throws. It lets those receivers run their routes to completion, and they can be more aggressive that way. So I love what they did in the first round of the draft, but they did great, I think, even throughout the draft. Trey Amos, a cornerback out of Ole Miss, he was somebody that fell to them at the end of the second round. I remember watching the draft, and it seemed like he was already on that best available players list that they put out there on ESPN and NFL Network. At the end of the first round, he was already being mentioned as somebody that could be taken by like a Buffalo Bills or maybe even by these Commanders in the first round. He falls to their second round pick. They're excited about that. And then round 4, pick 128 overall, Jalen Lane, a wide receiver out of Virginia Tech. You talked about somebody that maybe people weren't as familiar with in previous videos. Jalen Lane is probably an unheralded name. A lot of people are probably not familiar with him. He is probably benefiting the most from the Terry McLaurin holdout at this point. He's getting a lot of reps with the ones. He is probably going to be the punt returner and kick returner on this team, I imagine, as well as a slot receiver. And if he can get consistent stats from Jump Street because of other receivers not being there, he can have a very quick start to his career. Somebody that's young, not to take anything away from a Terry McLaurin or a Deebo Samuel, but a young target that can learn and grow alongside Jayden Daniels. I mean, sky's the limit for him. It could be wheels up and take off ready for Jalen Lane because looking at his highlights from his Virginia Tech days, I was extremely impressed. He's got good size, good speed, very good athleticism. Can't say nearly enough about a fourth round pick and what he could contribute to this team that we both think is going to be a deep playoff running team. And then I didn't have him in my notes, but Ja'Cory Croskett-Merritt, I believe he was their 7th-round pick at running back. There's been a lot of talk of how impressive he's been during camp this past few weeks and how good he could be. So much so to the point that they think he could be the true heir apparent to a Brian Robinson Jr. and choose not to re-sign him as he enters his contract year. He could be already being viewed as their future starter at running back. So you have to love when 7th-rounders get that kind of praise. Maybe it's just training camp talk. I don't know. But guys that can be drafted that late, like an Isaiah Pacheco for Kansas City, and hold down a starter position for a couple of years, that return on investment's just unreal. And it's what you're looking at if you're the Commanders. You want to take those dart throws because if we can turn a 7th-round pick into a starter that normally you would have to take a 2nd-round pick and use it on, they win. I mean, so I love what they did with their draft, but what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think, obviously they're going to be picking later in the rounds just because of how well they finished the 2024 season. And I think they did an exceptional job. So, looking forward to seeing these young players come in and being able to contribute. Not like you said, not right off the bat, but the building of an empire. We talked about it in the Buffalo video. That's what you want to do. You don't want to be good for 1 year. You want to be good for 5 years, 10 years. So, and I think the Commanders are on something here. I think they're going to be that team that that can sustain season over season, not just game by game. So I like it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can put out 2025.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is one of those teams that's almost being built like a dynasty team, and that you have some key contributors that are brought in as veterans because you're pushing your chips and you're trying to compete. But you're also on the back end, you're investing in some young weapons that you hope to bring along so that when those veterans are ready to call it quits and move on from the team, you've already got their replacements in place. And so now you are always in a place of adding talent with your draft picks. You don't have needs, you have opportunities to add talent. That's what separates the great teams from the good teams and
Sure.
certainly the bad teams. So I think Washington is really setting themselves up for success in the near future as well as the extended future. So pretty cool to see. That being said, their biggest strength right now it's Jayden Daniels. He looks like a stud quarterback and has from day one. You talk about his work ethic, his use of the VR technology, running reps at like 3 times normal speed so that way when he's playing against real competitors, everybody looks like they're in slow motion. He is changing the way that quarterbacks are being prepped at different levels of this game. Obviously, it's expensive technology and not everybody has invested in it the same way. But seeing the way that he started his career last year, I think what he continues to do, he is actually my MVP pick for this year. I haven't put any money on it yet, but I'm considering looking into the odds. I've never placed a sports wager before, but that is my go-to pick right now. Is Jayden Daniels will win MVP this year, and I think it's because of his preparation and the improvements that they've made around him. But this team is not without concern. I think the biggest one is probably Terry McLaurin. He remains unsigned as of us recording this video. It's August 14th, just to peel back the curtain a little bit for you guys. It does take us a few days to edit these videos, and we do release them on a schedule. So it'll actually be a full week from the time that we're recording these to when you're actually seeing it come out on the 21st. But as of now, Terry McLaurin, not signed, not on roster. I think he is showing up, but not necessarily participating. And he wants a deal. He wants something similar to what the Steelers gave DK Metcalf. And until he gets that, that is a big hole at wide receiver that Deebo Samuel is going to try to fill. Jaden Lane is going to try to fill. But this team is a lot better with McLaurin than they are without it. And the high expectations have been set now. They caught a lot of people by surprise last year. Not anymore. They know exactly who you are. They've got the game tape. They know what you're trying to do on offense. And it's going to be something that everybody on this team at every level is going to have to work their backsides off to try to live up to the expectations that have now been set and established by the 2024 team.
Yeah, and we've made videos on this channel, about sophomore slumps. I don't think that's the case with Daniels. I think he's gonna just proceed forward and he's gonna end up being great. Prediction wise, I got him winning the East for sure. Probably the NFC. I think they're gonna finish 13 wins easy. I, strength of schedule obviously plays a big part of it. Dallas, we talked about them yesterday. They could be potential moving up. Eagles are always going to be tough. I really want to call them the Philadelphia Bulldogs because of, UGA and they love recruiting out of there. We all know how good UGA is in college. So, but yeah, they're going to be in a tough conference. But yeah, I think they're going to be a tough football team. I don't see anybody, kind of stopping them other than the Eagles.
Yeah, I don't have them winning quite as many games as you do. Obviously, they were 12-5 last year. I've got them going 11-6 this year, and I think it's just because last year was kind of that perfect storm season. And until Terry McLaurin signs, I try to be a little bit more conservative, just in not knowing, that all their pieces are in place. That's kind of the big thing I think holding them back right now. But I mean, this is a very high ceiling, very high floor team. I don't think that they fall into single digits in wins. I can't see them winning fewer than 10 games, but I could see them winning 14 or 15 because of how good I think they can be at the big time positions. I think they've got the great quarterback. They've got good receivers. They've got a great left tackle. Obviously, if that offensive line improves as much as we think it is, the running backs can play up above their pecking order as it currently stands. So it's one of those things that I'm very high on them, but I'm also very aware of they can still lose to Dallas because Dallas has the capability of scoring points with the best teams out there. They can still get swept by the Eagles. They can lose both games to Philadelphia this year because that's how good of a team that we think they were and still will be. And so it's one of those things that I don't want anybody to say, oh, 11-6, he's hating on the Commanders. If you've been paying attention to these videos, you know that that's not the case. I'm actually very high on the Commanders, but I would rather set that number low and then be pleasantly surprised when they outdo it than to have too high of expectations and then act like their season was a failure when I had them at 13 wins and they only finished 11th and got a wild card spot and went right back to the NFC Championship game like we want them to be. I think right now, as far as a true season prediction, not just a record, but a season prediction, if you told me the Falcons and the Commanders were playing each other for the NFC Championship game, not only am I not surprised, but I am over the moon. Almost one of those where I view it as a near win-win position for me as a Falcons fan who owns Jayden Daniels in fantasy because I want to see both of those teams succeed. And so I would love that kind of matchup in the NFC Championship game because I know that I'm not getting the same old on either side of the bracket. So that would be cool for me. But as we get into fantasy football and as we kind of end these videos in our traditional way, who are you wanting from this team?
100% Jayden. Yeah, that's a gimme. I agree with you. I know you haven't put it out there, but I'm looking at your notes as well. So Debo, big fan of Debo, even when he was at the 49ers. Ertz, we said it earlier, that's his security blanket. That's his go-to guy. So with that being said, with him being a good quarterback, give him his safety blanket and let him throw to him and just pick up a ton of yards. He's going to be good in fantasy as well. So do I think he's going to beat out Brock Bowers? No, I think Brock Bowers is the best tight end in the game, but he would not be a bad second choice.
Yeah, I think somebody like Zach Ertz that you can get later on, if you do use an early round pick on a Brock Bowers or a Trey McBride to come back later on and also take a Zach Ertz as insurance or possibly a trade chip, I think that makes a lot of sense because yes, he's old, but he's very productive. He's going to be a target hog, and that's why I think he's on this list. And obviously, Jayden Daniels to me would be the second quarterback taken. I know Josh Allen does great things, and I'm not trying to downplay him, but to me, I want Lamar Jackson, and then I want Jayden Daniels, and then Josh Allen is QB3 for me in my rankings. So I love what Jayden Daniels does, both with his arm and with his legs. And so he's high priority for me on every single fantasy draft. I'm taking him anywhere I can. And then if Terry McLaurin comes back, obviously he's pretty high on that list. I think he's a true wide receiver one who maybe doesn't get valued like some wide receiver ones do. I've actually seen drafts where he gets taken behind some teams' wide receiver twos. When you look at maybe like a Devontae Smith or a T. Higgins, they're getting taken over Terry McLaurin in certain drafts. And I think that's a mistake. If he gets the contract that he's looking for, even if he just reports to the team without that new deal, which I don't necessarily expect to happen, I think he's got to be on your draft boards and very high up because of how good we think this offense is going to be. Obviously, Terry McLaurin and Debo Samuel both stand to benefit along with Zach Ertz. and having all those weapons in place is only going to be that much better for Jayden Daniels. So with good offenses come fantasy points, and you love to see when they're almost centralized in a few targets. And I think that's what the Commanders are building. As much as I love a Jalen Lane, he's not somebody that I'm looking at in redraft leagues, but these other four guys that we mentioned are ready to, contribute to your fantasy success and win you titles this year.
Yep. All right, guys, that's going to conclude the Washington Commanders. I hope you enjoyed it. I believe we said it at the top of the video. If you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. You'll know by the color of it, either it's gray or black, I believe, now on YouTube. But if it's not, if it doesn't say subscribed with a D, make it say it by clicking it. So we're racing to 250. We'd like to be there here, the next few weeks as we go through football season. But for that, we're going to end it here, and we will see you in tomorrow and the final video of this series with the Philadelphia